Hey guys, just wanted to take a moment to thank you for listening to Sidebar Forever. If you like the show, please subscribe to us at sidebarforever.com, as well as share episodes of the podcast on your social media. That way, new listeners can find us as well. F9, the 9th installment in the Fast and Furious franchise, is in theaters now. And the question had to be asked. Is it the greatest movie franchise of all time? Now, we don't think so, but with a worldwide box office gross of over $6 billion and sequels out the ass, the argument could be made. In our discussion, we try to unpack what makes the Fast and Furious franchise so appealing and seemingly resilient. How many times has this franchise reinvented itself since its initial release in 2001? And after 20 years, are fans coming back for the cast, the cars, the plots, or the outrageous set pieces? And lastly, what makes something a movie franchise versus just a series of sequels? I'm Adrian Johnson. It don't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning. And the Fast franchise is absolutely winning. But is it the greatest of all time?
F9 is in theaters.
Yes, it is.
Well, let me ask you this.
All right.
Would you go see F9 if you could?
If I could, I actually might. And I'm going to tell you why, man.
Okay.
As listeners may know to the show, both Dwight and myself, we're wrestling fans. You know what I'm saying? WWE fans. And so in this one, you got not only The Rock, which I think is probably making an appearance since he's, I think Hobbs. Is he the Hobbs in the series?
He's the Hobbs in the series, but he is not in this movie.
Oh, okay. Dang. Well, I was going somewhere with that. But instead, we got another WWE star, John Cena. You can't see me. So I might actually see it because I kind of like John Cena. Just his whole personality, his persona, and as a wrestling fan, he's pretty entertaining. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that I'm a fan of the franchise as a whole. I've not seen most of the franchise since Fast 2, Too Fast, Too Furious. Okay. You know what I'm saying? It's just like,
Yeah. And oddly enough, so F9 is in theaters now, came out June 25th.
Yeah.
There is no Hobbs. There's no Shaw. There's no Deckard Shaw. Just Dom and Letty and Roman and Tej. Cypher, who is the Charlize Theron villain, she comes back.
Okay.
And Mia is back.
Oh.
Yeah, Mia Toretto is back. And then, of course, John Cena as Dom's brother, Jacob.
Oh, brother Jacob.
But to your point, as far as the movies that you've seen in the franchise, Justin Lin is back directing F9.
Oh, okay.
And so Justin Lin has directed 5 of these movies.
Dang.
I mean, yeah, he's kind of like the main guy. I mean, really, I guess when you think about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So he's back as the director of F9. I think he did Tokyo Drift, Fast 5. I think he did whatever Fast 7 was.
Yeah.
He did quite a few of them. But dude, this franchise has made over $6 billion.
What?
Over $6 billion, which, in terms of any kind of conversation about it being the greatest movie franchise of all time, if the box office has anything to say about it, then you could certainly make that argument.
Oh, man.
And really, the fact that it has sequels, multiple sequels and now an offshoot with, Hobbs and Shaw.
Yeah.
You could definitely make the argument there, but let's start, I guess, by asking what makes something a franchise versus simply a series of sequels? Because I'm not exactly sure if I know what the difference is, but it feels to me, my gut tells me that there's a difference. Have you given that any consideration?
Yeah, for sure. A franchise is obviously something that continues. There's a continuous thread or threads that, start weaving themselves through, each subsequent sequel, and the difference is that the sequel is a whole brand new story that may actually take one or two of the characters or whatever to a whole different scenario while still retaining certain kernels of what made that previous movie successful. But in the case of the Fast and Furious series and other franchises, it's taking those same characters, and building upon them, building upon characterization, building upon, just other threads and strengthening them, hopefully, so that you're so familiar with them, you know exactly how they're going to react to a situation. You know what I'm saying? But if they don't, you're wondering, well, why? You know what I'm saying? What is being built upon to make them not act that way, or what is it different? But at the end of each movie, the character comes back to what it was to almost reset for the next movie, if there is one. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then here's the thing. So with the Fast and Furious as a franchise, as it relates to what you just said, one, all the characters don't appear in every movie. Like in Tokyo Drift, none of the original characters are in that, right? It's just Bow Wow and
yeah.
I
think Vin Diesel makes an appearance at the very end, like
at the end he does. Yeah, at the end he shows up. But that's one thing. Two, so if that's the case, then are the Terminator movies in all of their Frankensteinian, cobbled together, different takes, different, is that a franchise?
Oh, I do use
because see, here's the thing. Yeah. If you're looking at the Terminator as a franchise, so you've got to have Terminators. That's a given, right? That's job one. You've got to have time travel of some kind.
Yes.
You've got to have some level of science fiction.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
There's got to be some kind of a chase between the Terminator and a target.
Right.
But do you have to have Sarah Connor and or John Connor for it to feel like the franchise?
As a longtime Terminator fan, you do. Yeah. But then you look at something like Terminator Salvation, which takes place in the future war that's occurring.
Right.
John Connor's there, but then you have a whole brand new cast of characters and this future Terminator now. And to his detriment, the T-800 does show up. Arnold does show up, and that's when I flipped it off. I was like, oh, hell no. That's a bullshit. You know what I'm saying? So, but it does not have the time travel element in it. I think they're trying to destroy the machine that enables the time travel. So that way, if they destroy it, then the T-800 won't be able to go back to 1984 to hunt down Sarah Connor. That's the only reason John Connor is there. You know what I'm saying? So even with that, it's still trying to explain why they're not doing the time travel in that movie. But everything else, yes. Everything's there. Arnold comes back, and everything else, in addition to that, But do you need Sarah Connor and John Connor? To me, I think you do. Or, as I've heard with the latest movie, there are new characters that kind of fit those roles.
So the new one, Dark Fate, Sarah Connor's in it.
Oh, that's right.
She's
Word.
She's like a 60-year-old badass at this point.
Yeah.
And then Arnold shows up like 45, maybe 50 minutes into the movie.
Damn.
Like literally. Anyway, so I guess I'm asking that question because, so let's say Star Wars as a quote franchise.
Yeah.
And it is oftentimes Star Wars is more referenced as sequels and prequels than it is as a franchise. But, as Star Wars, if it's part of the feature film franchise universe, you got to have space.
No, of course.
You got to have lightsabers.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay. You got to have the Skywalker family.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have to have like X-Wings and TIE fighters?
They will make an appearance in some way, some form. Yes.
Okay. Stormtroopers?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to think of another franchise. Quote franchise. Okay, Mission Impossible.
Okay.
Which you've seen. Have you seen any of those?
I've seen up to number 3.
Okay. So we got to have Ethan Hunt.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
we got to have MI6. Is that who they work for? I can't even remember.
Oh no, it's the IMF.
IMF. The IMF. You got to have the IMF.
Yes.
Impossible Mission franchise. What? I don't know. Some kind of a team, either large or small.
Yes.
Gadgets and masks.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what I'm trying to get to with all of this is like, what makes the franchise smell like the franchise, taste like the franchise, look like the franchise, feel like the franchise to the viewer? Because I remember when Tokyo Drift came out, that was the big criticism, is that it did not feel like the Fast and Furious movies. Even less than Too Fast, Too Furious did, with Vin Diesel's character not being in the film. But then they bring in Roman, Tyrese Gibson. And then, what is Ludacris's real name? Chris Bridges?
Yes, Chris Bridges.
Chris Bridges as Tej. And then they bring in like a bad guy.
Yes.
Cole Hauser.
Cole Hauser, yes.
Yeah, so I guess what makes it, feel and taste and smell and sound like the franchise in order for it to work?
There's 3 elements. Every franchise has to have whatever 3 of its strongest elements are. They must be present. Okay. Even if you have another character take over that role. Like, for instance, in the Fast and Furious franchise, all right? We start off with the first one that introduces you to these characters, okay? The main 2 being Vin Diesel, and Paul Walker.
Dominic Toretto.
Exactly, Dominic Toretto. And the Snowman. Brian. Like he Young Jeezy or something, but...
Ooh, yeah. I'm so icy.
Yeah. But even when Dominic Toretto is not in Too Fast, Too Furious, you still have one of those elements there in Paul Walker, and you still have the cars, the crazy customized cars or whatnot, and you still have the racing. Like, even in Too Fast, Too Furious, there is no reason for them to be racing cars, and they still had to fit that in. Well, we got to race these other guys in order to get, on with Cole Hauser so that he'll believe us as drivers or whatnot.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you still had to fit in the car racing, those cars, and Paul Walker's character, and then you go to Tokyo Drift, where it still has the cars, it still has the racing, but it does not have either of the 2 lead protagonists. You know what I'm saying? Except for at the very end, where Vin Diesel comes. So it still has those 3 elements because he shows up. And I think with franchises overall, you have to have at least 3 elements that are going to be present in every movie, and just like.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, good. You finish it. Finish your thought.
I was going to say, just like franchises in the real world, outside of movies, McDonald's is known for what? Burgers and fries and shakes. All right? No matter where you go, it's going to taste the same. No matter who franchises it, who takes over their respective stores, that's going to be that, because you have those elements that are always going to be in place no matter where you go. Such as it is with movie franchises. You have to have 3 elements at least that are going to be present in every movie. Things may change as far as the plot or whatnot. The cast might even change somewhat. But you have to have those three things to be the glue that hold that franchise together.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was going to get to is it almost sounds like what we're talking about is branding.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, in other words, how is this perceived in the universe? And we make sure we satisfy those elements.
Mm-hmm.
So like what you were talking about with McDonald's, let's be specific. You got to have Big Macs.
Right.
You got to have them great ass fries with a little bit of salt on them.
Ooh.
You got to have milkshakes. Or, and now, you could expand that, of course, to like quarter pounders and with just cheeseburgers and also, apple pies and McFlurries and all that kind of stuff. But Big Macs and French fries and shakes, that's what it is. And you get it in a paper bag and you can't hardly get it home without reaching in the bag and grabbing a few fries.
Yeah.
Same thing with KFC, same thing with Burger King, with Wendy's, with Chick-fil-A, with Pizza Hut, with what have you. Doesn't matter if you're in Atlanta, if you're in Tokyo, if you're in, somewhere in West Africa, if you're in London, if you're wherever you are, the Big Mac should taste the same. It should feel the same. If I go to a McDonald's in Scotland, in Glasgow, and they got some kind of weird Big Mac that doesn't have the Thousand Island dressing on it, I'm gonna be ticked off, man.
Royale with cheese.
You know what I mean? Royale with cheese. There we go. So it definitely sounds like branding is the thing.
Yeah.
And okay, so here's the other thing then.
Okay.
How many movies do you have to have in a franchise in order for it to be considered a franchise and to move beyond just sequel and then another sequel?
3. I can tell you right off, it has to be 3 or more. Got to be 3. Because if you have just 2, that's just, the first one was successful enough. Let's try to make it again and make money. But if you have a third, now there's a pattern. You know what I'm saying? Now you've established this is what it's going to be every single movie. So you got to have 3 in order to cement it as at least a possibility for a franchise.
Okay, so I would challenge that and say it has to go beyond 3.
Oh, okay, so not just that 3, it got to go beyond. Okay.
It's got to be more than 3 for it to be a franchise. Here's why I say that.
All right.
So you have the original movie of anything.
Yeah.
Then if they do another one, it's the sequel.
Yeah.
Then the third one we call the threequel.
Yeah.
We don't have a name for the fourth one. That's to me when it enters franchise territory.
Good point. Okay.
That's
you.
When it enters franchise territory. So, you had the first Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
That De Palma directed. The second one that was directed by John Woo.
Yeah.
The third one that was directed by J.J. Abrams. And then by the time we get to the fourth one that Brad Bird did, we knew what to expect. And it had to feel a certain way in order to be a Mission Impossible movie. And not unlike the Fast and Furious, and I didn't even think about this until we were just talking just now, the Mission Impossible movies do kind of what the Fast and Furious does, and we'll touch on it a bit more later, in that it kind of keeps those core elements, but you get a different kind of Mission Impossible movie as it's going on. It hasn't quite reinvented itself per se, but like the first one was like espionage, almost like the TV show.
Yes.
The second one was really more like a John Woo movie. It was really just his take on Mission Impossible. The third one was a J.J. Abrams movie. It was what he was doing with Alias and what he did with Angel.
He had some other one. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
He had another one. Yeah. It was what he did in television, but he just brought it to a feature film.
Yeah.
And then Brad Bird, that was Brad Bird's first feature directorial, other than, before Iron Giant and The Incredibles.
Yeah.
So, and I guess the credit, kind of giving credit to where it's due to Tom Cruise.
Oh, yes.
In that he puts himself in the hands of these directors and lets them kind of do their thing with his franchise. You know what I mean? Like he kind of lets them kind of tell their kind of Ethan Hunt story with this particular movie. Now, he's had a great amount of success, more success with the last two with McQuarrie. The writer and director of think McQuarrie wrote Ghost Protocol.
Okay.
And then he wrote and directed Rogue Nation. And then he wrote and directed Fallout, the last one.
Okay.
So he's had a lot of success with McQuarrie, and I think McQuarrie is doing the new one that they've been shooting since COVID started. So anyway, I say all that to say I think it's 4. I think once you get to 4, you're talking about like some Bulls championship, like multiple rings, some Tom Brady, Infinity Gauntlet, the 5 stuff. You know what I'm saying? You're getting into that kind of territory. And anyway, but another question I would ask is this.
Yeah.
Because you were saying like 3 movies.
Yeah.
That was your original premise.
Yeah.
So are Hunger Games and the Lord of the Ring movies considered a franchise, or would they just be trilogies?
Just trilogies, because they stop at that 3rd. Okay. All right, Mr. Prosecutor. Okay, prosecuted your point. All right. All right, goddammit.
Well, and then also too, like those are based on, the Fast and Furious, Terminator, Mission Impossible, even Star Wars. Those are all original IPs.
Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings and Hunger Games are based on previously existing IPs that are being adapted.
Yeah.
So with that, you really, as far as the Lord of the Rings is concerned, you really were only talking about, the Fellowship of the Ring and the
Return of the King and
the Two Tower or whatever, and the Return. Yeah, you were just talking about those works being adapted, and that's it. Same thing with Hunger Games. It was the first one, and then the Sparrow or whatever it was, whatever they were. So.
But you know what else?
Go ahead.
But to further prove your point, man, I was thinking of like the Rambo movies. All right. Like I was thinking, I grew up on, as we did of our generation, Rambo, obviously First Blood and First Blood Part 2, and then Rambo 3. And within that though, by the time it got to the 3rd, that was an example where it felt like a franchise. And I think because of the humongous success of Part 2, so when Part 3 came, it has the same exact formula as Part 2, Right. And it almost felt like, those 3 movies in and of themselves became a franchise. But then years later, a decade more later, you have just Rambo, the 4th movie.
Right.
Which totally just... It turned Rambo into he looked like, Jason Voorhees, like it was all bloody and serial killery and just, And then this last one, Last Blood,
Last Blood.
And so it's just like, But speaking of Stallone though, another franchise too would be like the Rocky movies,
Right.
Definitely. And again, to your point, they expanded beyond those 3 movies, you know what I'm saying? And it became a franchise. After number 4, exactly what you're saying. You knew what to expect from a Rocky movie. No matter how much they changed the plot a little bit, like Rocky 5, he goes back to the streets. Well, he still has to fight, this other guy, even if it is in the streets. He still has the human interest stuff with his family and whatnot, And so it's just funny how you're exactly right. How much I think you've established a rule for franchises. It's got to be beyond 3 movies for sure.
And I guess the other thing too is leading into other franchises, quote franchises, like you mentioned Rocky. Like we were talking about Hunger Games and Lord of the Rings, like the Harry Potter movies. Those are adapted from previously established IPs, but is it kind of considered a franchise, or is it just a series of films that are all kind of interconnected with these same characters, with Hermione and Harry and Ron and and Snake or whatever his name is, all these characters.
It's funny. My youngest daughter is a huge Harry Potter fan. Oh man, she loves them.
Okay,
and she loves the movies even more than the books. And it's funny. It's like one of those that kind of rides the line. it has a finite ending as far as this is how much the material is. You know, just like all those other previous adaptations of other IPs, it ends here. Rowling wrote the books to this point. That's it. There's not going to be another Harry Potter without her writing it, you know, first to be adapted. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I think that marks a major difference. Franchises can kind of go off script, so to speak, no pun intended, you know, and do other stories with these characters that don't involve the actual source material. But just as long as certain elements are there and present, it's still a viable part of being a franchise. But I think that's a marked difference. Yeah.
So I wonder then, like in terms of Rowling's control of the IP, can the studio make Harry Potter related films and or television shows or whatever? Because aren't they developing? Are they developing? Was it Harry Potter? No. It's the Lord of the Rings that they're actually developing something, an IP for TV or whatever. But I'm just wondering, can they do something Harry Potter related without her approval, without her co-signing?
I don't think so, because even from what my youngest daughter tells me, she's the Potter expert. You know, even stuff like Fantastic Beast, you know, which is tangentially related. You know, it's still within that universe, and Rowling had her hands in that. But it's not like the studio can just get some other writer and come in and say, all right, just take the Golden Trilogy, you know, Trinity, I should say. My daughter's going to kill me. The Golden Trinity of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and write a separate new story with them, and don't consult Rowling. You know what I'm saying? Rowling gives her blessings and say, yeah, go ahead, do it. But then you run the danger of invalidating some of what's gone before in the franchise. You know what I mean? So I think that's why she keeps control of it, you know, so fiercely, you know?
Okay. So this brings me to another question, and this is one that that really bothers me as it relates to trying to nail down a franchise and what it means. And as it relates to the conversation of Fast and Furious possibly being the, quote, greatest of all time, is this. If a series of films or a franchise is rebooted, is it still a part of the same franchise? So, for instance, you mentioned the Rocky films.
Yeah.
Creed comes along a few years ago. It's got Rocky elements to it, and Rocky's in it.
Yeah.
But is it really a part of the Rocky franchise, so to speak? That's one. Another example would be Planet of the Apes. They've done so many different versions of that have nothing to do with astronauts going to the future or, you know, what, you know, none of that horse shit that we got, you know, not horse shit, but, you know, the stuff from the original films that kind of made them what they were. And let's not forget that they did like 4 Planet of the Apes films starting back in the 70s, you know, with the original with Charlton Heston.
That's right. You're right.
That's before Mark Wahlberg and Tim Burton. That's before the Planet of the Apes movies that came here recently with, you know,
James Franco?
James Franco and whatever. And they've done like 2 or maybe 3 of those.
They have. It's 3. Yeah.
So it's been rebooted. Same thing with the Spider-Man films. Are all those Spider-Man films considered a franchise or just a sequence of films because they've been rebooted 3 times in the last dozen years? Same thing now happening modern day in current real time with Batman, where you had the Tim Burton Batman movies from the 80s and, you know, the other people who did it. Then you have the Batman movies that Nolan did in the early 2000s. Then you have now, they're doing another series of Batman movies, at least starting with the one directed by Matt Reeves with Robert Pattinson playing Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Are all those a, quote, franchise, or are all those just takes on a character, and Matt Reeves is trying to start his own franchise as maybe Nolan did with his 3 films, although, you know, we established that 3 doesn't quite make it a franchise.
Right.
And Batman, the original Batman in the 80s, were there 3 of those or 4 of those? 3 of those, right?
No, it's 4 of those because it ended with Batman and Robin.
Yeah, so you had the 2 with Tim Burton, the 2 with Michael Keaton, then you had Val Kilmer comes along, and then Clooney comes along.
And then that's it.
Yes, but there were at least 2 with Keaton. So we're talking about 4 movies?
Yeah.
So they were, 4. Yes, so you're right. So you see what I'm saying? When you reboot it, does it take on a new DNA? Is it like, it's been adopted by a new parent and now it has a new last name and it doesn't live over in East Point anymore. Now we live in Dunwoody. We'll shop at Big Star no more. We'll shop over there no more. We shop at Publix.
Big Star. Oh, man, I heard that in a minute.
Yeah,
wow.
We don't wear Pro-Keds anymore. Yo. We wear Nikes and Adidas.
That's interesting. That's a interesting point that you posited, man, because those movies do feel like, especially the superhero examples that you mentioned with Spider-Man and Batman, those do feel like just separate series of films, not necessarily franchises. Not in the way that, like, the Marvel, the MCU, they've built numerous franchises, even though the Iron Man films have come up to just 3. There's only been... Right. Well, no. I'm sorry. There's been more of the Avengers movies, for sure. But those feel like franchises, though, because those characters appear in other movies within that universe. So it's almost as if you could almost expand it to, even though there's different movies within that universe, the whole universe in and of itself is the franchise. You know what I'm saying?
See, that's what I would say for sure as far as the Marvel universe, cinematic universe is concerned.
Yeah.
Is because none of the solo movies have gone past 3, if I'm not mistaken. Thor's only had 3.
Yeah.
Captain America's had 3.
Right.
Iron Man had 3.
Yeah.
And then Spider-Man, as it relates to Fox/Marvel, that's when you get into, okay, well, they actually did more than that, so to speak. But that's really it, And so the Marvel Studios-ness of it actually makes it feel like a franchise as opposed to just specific characters or a specific overarching story or whatever. In other words, it smells, tastes, feels, sounds like Marvel, then it's part of the franchise, whatever that means. And actually, the definition of franchise, I looked it up, is a series of related works such as novels or films, each of which includes the same characters or different characters that are understood to exist and interact in the same fictional universe with characters from other works. So this definition sounds tailor-made for what you're describing there, where the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a Grand Canyon-sized franchise that has many tentacles and many branches, coming off of it.
I just had a thought. I was watching something interesting on YouTube, and I didn't realize this until this particular commentator, brought it up. Do you remember a couple years ago, Tom Cruise starred in a remake of The Mummy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't know this, and because that version of The Mummy did so poorly at the box office and didn't catch on, Universal ended it right there. But Universal was actually they were trying to use that as the launch of a brand new franchise, as far as finding a way to bring those Universal monsters back together in something called, I think, the Dark Universe or something like that. You can look it up. Universal was like, let's find a way to reintroduce the Universal monsters within their own, universe, so to speak. And it was supposed to be the Dark Universe. And they started laying eggs for it, so to speak. Not unlike the movie, but but even in The Mummy, Russell Crowe shows up as Dr. Jekyll, if I'm not mistaken. So they're like, so we'll put that in there because we're going to definitely do a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde spinoff, and other things like that. But it failed to launch because the movie just did so poorly, and Tom Cruise was trying to get another franchise up. He's like, man, I got this. I got MI. I got Mission Impossible. Let me see, man, I could do this. Bro, you better stick to jumping off them buildings, dog. Holding on to them planes, bro. Man, no, bro. So,
So it's
funny when you're trying to do that, and it just doesn't take off. Like, it's almost as if you can consciously say, I'm going to make a franchise, but it's got to survive more than 3 movies. So it's almost like you got to make those 3 movies good enough so that it survives past that. It's like it's got to survive childhood, then adolescence, then it's got to grow up, go to college, and then once it gets to college and out on its own, okay, now it's a franchise. Okay, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I didn't realize that they were trying to do kind of like the dark universe or whatever with those Mummy films. And although that's a good idea to some extent, it's almost like, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen taking these monster archetypes that we know from the old black and white films, and then bringing them all into modern day, as like you're saying, and where their paths interact. In history, so the Frankenstein monster, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Dracula,
the Wolfman,
the Mummy, what have you. I think that's actually a pretty interesting idea. So, as it relates to what Universal was attempting to do with the Mummy, and what you described with the MCU as being its own franchise, this is the thing I kind of wonder as well.
Okay.
So writer-director Edgar Wright has a very specific voice, a very specific directorial style, and he tends to work on... I feel like Edgar Wright, in a way, is like Quentin Tarantino, where he is his own genre.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if he's doing a monster zombie movie, if he's doing a cop, a take on, 80s cops or 90s, action films, whatever it is. He is his own genre. Tarantino is his own genre. If he's doing a Western, if he's doing crime fiction, if he's doing whatever the hell he's doing, it's really a Tarantino thing that you're buying into, as opposed to the subgenre itself.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like with Edgar Wright's work with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, because they've done 3, maybe 4 movies together. I think it's 4. Is that an example of a director's franchise? Because to an extent, you almost feel like the characters in Shaun of the Dead and in Hot Fuzz and The End of the World or whatever it was, they're all kind of the same. You know what I mean? And I'll expand that to say, again, the Edgar Wright franchise. In the same way as John Singleton had with his movies, where he had a specific kind of movie he wanted to tell about where he grew up in southern Los Angeles. So it started with Boys in the Hood, and then went to Poetic Justice, and then went to Baby Boy. And they all kind of feel interconnected, even though none of the characters are the same in those 3 films. Same thing with Kevin Smith in New Jersey with Clerks, and then Chasing Amy, and all the films that he's done where he's telling, is he his own, creating his own franchise by doing a universe or telling stories within a universe that he wants to tell. Does that feel like a franchise?
Damn, god damn, you come with some hits, man. That is a great point. That is a great point. I never considered that. Yeah, I think in a way you're absolutely right, man. And if you want to talk about Tarantino, I mean, he's put things in each of his films to connect them. Certain characters will reference, even from other films he didn't direct, will reference Alabama, in Reservoir Dogs. Harvey Keitel mentions working with Alabama, in a few of his films, Red Apple Cigarettes, Bid Kahuna Burger, things like that. That kind of
the Vega brothers. And,
Vegas. Yeah. So it's funny how he kind of created his own Tarantino verse, and all of his movies feel the same, as though those characters could ostensibly run into each other, and it would fit because they're all from that same mind. You know what I mean? Another one I would mention is somebody like a Wes Anderson, where all of his movies have that same feel. It's a Wes Anderson movie. It is.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Even down to the way he, does composition of his scenes or whatnot, and just the whole mood of the film. It's a Wes Anderson universe. You know what I'm saying? So to your point, I definitely think that there's a case to be made for a director, creating or crafting his own franchise, so to speak, just based on the consistent elements that he puts into his or her, into their own productions, even if it is from movie to movie to movie. Yeah, for sure. That's a great point. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think to a lesser degree, Spike Jonze, I've seen several of his films. They all kind of feel similar. They feel connected in a way, maybe unintentionally so. He might say differently. And then also Greta Gerwig, the writer-director of Lady Bird, and then she just did an adaptation of Little Women.
Okay.
And Lady Bird and Little Women feel weirdly connected, even though obviously Little Women is a period piece.
Yeah.
But it feels connected. I definitely have a sense of her voice and choices with camera movements and characterization and the kind of stories that she wants to tell, specifically as it relates to women protagonists and women heroes as in the center of the story.
Yeah.
That would be another one. In our text exchange about this conversation, I asked the question because Dwight was on that with us, and he mentioned the Bond series. Is the Bond series of films a franchise, or is it a series of films? Because he's really the only consistent thread throughout the entire thing. I mean, you have M, and you have
Moneypenny,
some of the you have that, but essentially it's him, and none of those movies are connected. So in the Fast and Furious, you're going to have later on where Dom gets back in with the gang, and they're going to there's a reference of the history they have together going back to the first film. Or there is a reference to, in Fast 5, which I think is the best of the Fast and Furious movies. In Fast 5, they're on the run in Brazil, and they reference, hey, we've been running. Me and Mia, we're out of money. We've been a couple for whatever. Mia's pregnant. She's going to have this baby. I've lost, Mia references, I've lost you, before. I'm not going to lose you again. You got to stay with us. They reference that history. But in the Bond films, there's never a reference to Goldfinger or, to Drax or, Moonraker. There's never any references to anything else, really. I mean, if it is, it's just vague. It's just mostly this movie and what's going on in this film, that movie and what's going on in that film.
You're right. Yeah, you just shot down my point, because I was going to say, in the one case I could think of with that is the character of Blofeld is referenced in a couple of the Bond movies, the Sean Connery Bond movies, in fact. No, in fact, 3 of them. You Only Live Twice, where they're in the volcano in Japan, and Blofeld is ostensibly killed. And then in Diamonds Are Forever, Blofeld comes back, but he's had plastic surgery to remake himself, But also in a third one that doesn't even have Sean Connery in it. It's that one that has George Lazenby. God, what is the name of it? On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Yeah,
Blofeld is in that one as Telly Savalas. And
who loves you, baby?
No dum-dums, no lollipops in this one. But but Blofeld is in that one. And then beyond that, none of the villains ever show up again. They're done with finitely at the conclusion of each of those respective films, and they are not meant to be mentioned ever again. It's like that was a book, and now that book is on the shelf. Let's start a new book. Yeah.
That's a perfect way to describe it, where it's like, okay, you have a bookshelf in your expansive library in your home, and on this one shelf you've got a dozen or 16 or whatever novels written by Ian Fleming, and it's like you said, when you're done with it, you close it, you take the bookmark out, you put it back in its place, and that's it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then you start the next one, and then continue on from there. I do feel like, as it relates to what we were describing earlier about the seeing and the smelling and the hearing and the tasting, that the Bond movies do have to have key things to feel like a Bond movie. Like, no matter who's playing Bond, whether you're talking about Sean Connery to Roger Moore to Lazenby to Dalton to
Brosnan,
Pierce Brosnan and then on to Daniel Craig. You got to have Bond. He's got to look good in a suit. He's got to be drinking a martini, shaken not stirred.
Right.
He's got to be macking on the ladies. He's got to have a gadget, although the gadgets have been minimized in the Craig, the Craig Bond era. He's got to have his support team, but they've got to be a bit in the distance.
Yeah.
It's got to feel like one lone man kind of doing it all out there in the field. And then he's got to have a fierce, formidable opponent. If you don't have that, someone for him to square off with that feels like, okay, if he makes one false move, he could get his cat peeled.
Yeah.
Then that you got to have that. So for that, it does to me feel franchisey, or franchise-esque, if you will. But I have always considered them to be just a series of films. In a series of films. For whatever reason, I don't know why I have to make that distinction, but I guess I, just kind of do. But
now, do you feel like even with the recent, because you could almost call the Craig movies a reboot of the Bond movies,
Right.
And I think in the newest ones, there is some semblance of a continuity there, because I think in Skyfall, M is killed. And because of that,
yes.
sets him off in the next one. So he's referencing back to, M's gone now. Now he's just this lone wolf, so to speak. And he's just, on whatever mission or whatever path he's on because of what happened in the previous movie, No,
you're right. And I did see, if I'm not getting them confused, Skyfall is the one with, I forgot the actor's name who played Javier Bardem.
Yeah.
He plays the antagonist. He plays Bond's opponent, and M is killed at the end of the movie. But I think you're right, and I think that was a tact that they took, the producers and writers of the films, and the Broccoli family, I guess, in this new reboot or relaunch. And I guess all of them to some extent are a relaunch, although the Connery films and the Roger Moore films and the Dalton films and the Lazenby films all feel kind of similar.
Right.
They all owe to that late 60s aesthetic. It's only when Brosnan comes in the 90s where it starts to feel a little more different, and there is more of a serious reference to, Bond being a dinosaur and being a leftover from, Cold War aesthetics and that's, Cold War mentality.
Yeah.
And then you get to Daniel Craig. And I think the Daniel Craig Bond, if I had to guess, and I've not read anything, I'm sure there are more smarter people than us who have discussed it.
Sure.
I think they took their cues from Mission Impossible, where they said, okay, having your main spy want to have a life and then have that be taken away from him. So Bond doesn't have a wife and he doesn't have like a long-term partner, romantic partner, but he has Moneypenny. He has M. He has these figures in his life that have gone on and on and on. And so to start attacking those relationships, because that's what happens in the Mission Impossible movies. Tom Cruise's character, Ethan Hunt, wants to get married, and then that goes to shit. And so he sends his wife off into witness protection, WITSAC or something.
Yeah.
And she just appears back in, here and there. And her last appearance was in the last film, Fallout. So I do think they probably took that cue from him. But to finish it up, man, examples of movie franchises, we discussed Mission Impossible, Star Wars, Harry Potter, the X-Men films.
There have been more than 3, yes.
Yeah, but they've all kind of they're all kind of wacky and the story's all fucked up. The Jurassic Park films.
That's true. There have been more than 3.
That's a franchise. Yep. That's a franchise. Yeah, the Rocky films, which we talked about, Toy Story.
Yeah. Okay. And they're all connected.
4 of those.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they're all connected. And then even going back in time a bit, the Bowery Boys movie back in the 30s, yo. So you have, it started out as the dead end kid.
Yeah.
Then it was Tough Little Guys.
Yeah.
Essentially all the same characters, but they called them something different. Then the East Side Kids.
That's right. Yeah.
And then we eventually land on the Bowery Boys.
Yeah.
You know, so, and it was one thing too, one of the main characters in the Bowery Boys was a character called Slap Mahoney.
Yeah.
Played by an actor named Leo Gorcey.
Leo Gorcey, yes. He was the main guy. Okay. Yeah.
So whenever I would see those movies, you know, I saw those movies when I was a kid, like summers going to Chicago to visit my father when my parents split. So I remember watching those old movies and just loving them. It's like, wow, you know, yeah, here he comes. Let's give him the wakes.
Yes.
You know, you know, don't cut me, Mick. Don't cut me. It's the market is squeeze.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing Leo Gorcey, you know, and it's in the 30s and it's black and white. And so later on, when I became a fan of Jack Kirby.
Yeah.
And started reading about him growing up as a kid on the Lower East Side, you know, before he went into the Army. And then you see pictures of him as a younger man, and it's in black and white. And he always looked like Leo Gorcey to me from those films. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is how Kirby grew up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I was thinking, you know, like Gorcey felt like Kirby to me because they looked a little bit alike. And I was like, damn, you know, this is how Jack grew up before he went to the Army and then eventually became, you know, the king of comics.
And that might be an inspiration as well for the Yancey Street gang, you know.
So, right, yeah. So, yeah. And then also, too, and this is the worst example,
okay.
but the Charlie Chan movies.
Oh, yeah.
Ugh. Yeah. Now, if we want to give the crown to the Fast and the Furious or whomever, we can do that.
Uh-huh.
But can't nobody fuck with Charlie Chan in these feature films. Charlie Chan has been featured in over, I think, 50 feature films starting in 1926.
What?
There have been 50 feature films based on the Charlie Chan character, 2/3 of which had his name in the title.
Right. What? Damn, I didn't know it was that many. Damn.
They were immensely popular, apparently, because they wouldn't have done this if they weren't popular. And they just kept doing them and kept doing them and kept doing them. And I don't know if it was the same actor playing Charlie Chan. I know it was a white dude with makeup on to appear Asian and speaking with an affectation. But there were 50 of those fuckers, yo.
Dang.
And I was like, wow. So if the length of the tail of the beast is any indicator of the beast, them Charlie Chan movies, they were the beast, yo. They were the one. But the last question is, of course, what is the greatest franchise of all time?
See, I knew he was going to say that.
If it's not Fast and Furious, what is the greatest one?
My gut really wants to say, and even though I don't even like all the movies, you know, my gut really wants to say Star Wars, you know, just in terms of its cultural impact, you know, just in pop culture, period. But also, it has made a lot of money. I don't know if it's made more than the Fast and Furious franchise, but...
Oh, it has.
Oh, okay.
It has. There's a list, and I think it is higher on the list than Fast and Furious. I think Fast and Furious is like 5 or number 7.
Yeah. And
yeah.
You know, it has the cultural impact. You know, it's definitely, you know, hit at the box office for sure, you know, as we're intimated now. And just yeah, man, it's an expansive universe that keeps expanding. Although now I'm wondering, and in some ways I wonder if the character of Rey is just meant to keep that and Kylo Ren, if those characters are meant to keep that strain of the Skywalkers alive, so that way the series can still say, we still got some Skywalkers in here.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
like this they're still talking about Star Wars. So we ain't never gonna get rid of them Skywalkers now. You know what I mean? So in that case, yes, I would argue that Star Wars, be it for better or for worse, good or ill, to me, seems like the greatest franchise ever.
I would say so as well. You know, in terms of the amount of films, the box office gross, The merch is incredible.
Oh yeah, everywhere.
Like the merch, dwarfs a Fast and Furious by a long shot. Mission Impossible doesn't really have merch.
No.
Toy Story, they've only done 4 of those, at this point. And I think also too, when you talk about like theme park rides and amusement parks and offshoots in terms of, what it's inspired outside of the film universe, I would say it probably is the greatest film or movie franchise of all time. But I will give an honorable mention to Mission Impossible.
Okay.
Where in those films, like the first one started out just okay.
Yeah.
The first one that De Palma did, it was fine,
Yeah.
With him and John Voight, but the last 2 Mission Impossible films have been the best of the franchise. So it's actually gotten better as it has gone on. Probably, all credit due to Macquarie as one of the creatives behind the scenes, behind the camera and behind the keyboard, in terms of crafting the story and then bringing the story to life on film. I mean, literally, it is unquestionable that people say, the last 2, Fallout and I guess it's Rogue Nation.
Rogue Nation, yeah.
Or
I think it's Rogue Nation.
Is it? I think it's Rogue Nation and Fallout, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. That those are the best movies of the Mission Impossible series. So
now, do you feel like that's because like there has to be some element of consistency, and it's not just Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise, in the role, killing himself literally almost to get these box office numbers up.
Yeah.
But do you think because of the consistency now that you have in place, Christopher McQuarrie behind the scenes, both writing and directing, that it's bringing some type of consistency to it, so that now it's starting to feel like not only a franchise, but there's some continuity being established too, because the franchise does need that consistency and that continuity,
I suspect so. I think it's that. I think it's although I think Brad Bird wrote and directed, co-wrote and directed Ghost Protocol when he did it. But I think you're probably right. I think also too there is a case to be made probably that there's some kind of a thing of like the muse and the artist where Cruise started working with Macquarie on Valkyrie, because I think Macquarie wrote Valkyrie.
Ah, okay.
And that's where they linked up. And then he found a good creative collaborator. And where someone who spoke his language, they look for the same things in terms of story points and plot points and story beats, and just had a good collaboration. And that has just been 2 chemicals coming together and making a greater third chemical by their mixing. I think that's kind of what has happened with this particular series.
Can I mention one last thing before we go? And you just made me think of it with that. It's not quite a franchise per se, but speaking of creators and, making a good team like that, I was rereading a book on Die Hard, which is another franchise that we didn't mention, but that franchise kind of went to shit after number 3. But anyway, I was reading a book on the history of Die Hard, the Die Hard films, and Joel Silver, not only with Die Hard, but other action-oriented movies that he's been involved with as far as a producer and so forth, they all kind of have that Joel Silver feel, almost as if there is a Silververse almost. And that is kind of due to the fact that if you look at all of those movies, the screenplay comes down to one person, Stephen D'Souza, And in the book, it mentioned that, Joel Silver's MO for a long time throughout the 80s was he would get the screenplay in for a particular movie, right? And somebody would have to pull the original writer aside and say, hey, look, I don't quite know how to tell you this, but the way it works around here is that Joel Silver is going to buy your script, but he's going to fire you, and he's going to bring in Stephen D'Souza. I just want to let you know. And ostensibly, that's what would happen. every single time because Joel Silver trusted D'Souza so much that he knew that he was going to get the product that he wanted out of any film that he produced if he brought D'Souza in to write it. So there's a consistency. That's why a lot of those Joel Silver movies in the 80s kind of feel and have that same, you know, the characters kind of sound the same. The situations are very familiar because it's one man writing it, and Silver and D'Souza kind of formed a kinship creatively to make those movies come about. So your point is well taken.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe that might be it then, because D'Souza wrote. I think I remember seeing him in the behind the scenes talking about Die Hard. He wrote Die Hard, correct?
Yes. Well, it started off with Jeb Stewart, and then Silver said, thanks, Jeb, but D'Souza got it from right here. And D'Souza came in and added some stuff to it, and it made it feel like a Joel Silver movie, but expanded upon what Jeb Stewart had written. You know what I'm saying? But D'Souza is the secret sauce, if you will. If it was McDonald's, he would be the secret sauce that went on the Big Mac. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Okay.
That concludes this episode of Sidebar Forever, hosted by Dwight Clark, Swain Hunt, and Adrian Johnson. You can find us online at sidebarforever.com. Any emails or questions can be directed to us at sidebarforever@gmail.com. And also, subscribe to us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram.